When I first stumbled across this story, it sounded like something out of a horror film. A mother, a nurse, a grandmother, confessing to the unthinkable, the murder of her own son. Not just murder, but dismemberment. This isn't a crime from a faraway past. This happened recently, in the summer of 2024, in a small town in northern Italy. What drove a 61-year-old woman to kill her only son? And why did his own wife join her in the act? Tonight, I want to take you inside the case of Lorena Venier and her son, Alessandro. A crime so disturbing, so layered with abuse, fear, and betrayal, that even seasoned investigators admitted they had rarely seen anything like it. Our story begins in Gemona del Friuli, a quiet town in the Friuli-Venezia Giulia region, near the border with Austria and Slovenia. It's a picturesque place. Stone churches. Alpine peaks. A town where everyone seems to know each other. But behind the walls of one family home, darkness had been festering for years. The home belonged to 61-year-old nurse, Lorena Venier. Living with her was her 35-year-old son, Alessandro Venier. His young wife, 30-year-old Mailyn Castro Monsalvo, who had moved from Colombia. And their newborn baby girl, born in January of that same year. From the outside, it might have seemed like a multi-generational family, living under one roof, raising a child together. But inside, tensions were spiraling out of control. Lorena, the mother, described her son as violent. She claimed he had beaten both her and his wife, insulted them, and even threatened to kill them. Mailyn, struggling with postpartum depression, allegedly suffered the worst of it. According to Lorena, Alessandro mocked her mental health struggles. He belittled her. He kept her under constant fear. And then, there were the threats. Lorena later told police that Alessandro once warned Mailyn, "I'll take you to Colombia and drown you in the river. No one will ever look for you there." By the time their baby was born, Lorena said Mailyn was already begging her for help. She told investigators, "Mailyn had been asking me to kill my son Alessandro for months, ever since the day their daughter was born." At first, it sounded like desperation speaking. But over time, it turned into a chilling plan. Lorena wasn't just a mother. She was a nurse. That meant she had access to medical supplies, the kind of supplies that could make someone unconscious, or worse. She later admitted, "I decided to report my son once. And when I tried, he punched me in the back." For Lorena, that was the breaking point. She claimed she could no longer endure her son's violence. And Mailyn, terrified, isolated, far from her home country, allegedly urged her mother-in-law to act. Together, they began to plan. For months, they quietly mapped out how they might do it. Every detail. From the drugged lemonade they would serve him, to the tools they would need to dispose of his body. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was a murder that was carefully, coldly premeditated. The plan was simple but chilling. First, Alessandro would be drugged with a tranquilizer hidden in his drink. Then, he would be injected with insulin, doses strong enough to put him into unconsciousness. After that, they would suffocate him with a pillow. And to make sure he didn't wake up, strangle him with shoelaces. When you listen to it laid out like this, it doesn't sound like the work of a desperate mother in the heat of the moment. It sounds like the work of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. And soon, the night of the murder arrived. On the evening of July 25, 2024, everything was in place. Alessandro had no idea that the women in his life, his wife and his mother, had already sealed his fate. They welcomed him home like any other night. He trusted them. He drank the lemonade they served. Inside the glass was a powerful tranquilizer. Enough to slow his movements, cloud his thoughts, and weaken his body. But the tranquilizer wasn't enough. Lorena knew that. That's why she had taken insulin from her hospital. With practiced hands, she injected her son. Not once. Twice. His body grew heavy. His chest slowed. He drifted in and out of consciousness. That's when the women struck. Alessandro Venier was suffocated with a pillow. And to make sure he would never open his eyes again, shoelaces were pulled tight around his neck. In those final moments, a man lost his life at the hands of the two people he should have trusted most. His wife. His mother. What followed was even more horrifying. Lorena, the nurse, the mother, later confessed in chilling detail. She said, "I took care of Alessandro's dismemberment myself. I used a hacksaw and a sheet to hold the blood. I dissected him into 3 pieces. There were no blood splatters. That's why the carabinieri found everything in order." With clinical precision, she cut apart her own son's body. Not in rage. Not in chaos. But in order. Method. Control. She wrapped him. Hid him in the basement. While her granddaughter, his infant daughter, slept just upstairs. Mailyn, the wife, then played her part. She moved the body into the garage. She covered it with quicklime, calcium oxide, a substance once used in ancient times to hasten decomposition and mask odors. The plan was almost perfect. They thought they could erase the traces. But there was one thing they couldn't erase: guilt. Not long after the murder, Mailyn broke. On July 25, she picked up the phone and called the police. Her words spilled out in a rush of panic and horror. She confessed everything. When officers entered the home, they found it clean. Too clean. No splatters. No mess. No chaos. But in the basement, they found Alessandro. Cut into 3 pieces. It was the kind of discovery that silenced even the most hardened detectives. In the days that followed, both women were interrogated. Lorena, the mother, confessed openly. She didn't try to deny it. She didn't even seem to hide her methodical approach. She said her daughter-in-law was only responsible for moving the body. That she herself had done the killing and dismemberment. Mailyn, on the other hand, told investigators that she had suffered relentless abuse at the hands of her husband. She said she feared for her life, and for her daughter's life. Prosecutors charged Lorena with murder and concealing a body. Mailyn faced investigation for instigation to murder, accused of pushing her mother-in-law to carry out the crime. Was this truly an act of protection? Or was it revenge, plotted carefully by 2 women who felt cornered and powerless? Investigators pointed out the chilling level of planning. Months of preparation. Medical supplies. Quicklime. A hacksaw. This was not the rash decision of a battered woman. This was something darker. The town of Gemona del Friuli was left shaken. Neighbors who once waved to Lorena on her way to work could hardly believe she had killed her son. But others whispered, maybe there was truth to her story. Maybe she had finally snapped under the weight of Alessandro's violence. One thing was certain: a child was left without her father. A family was shattered beyond repair. This case forces us to confront difficult questions. How far can abuse push someone? At what point does survival blur into premeditated murder? And when 2 women plot together, one a victim, the other a mother, does sympathy outweigh justice? Domestic violence leaves scars that the public rarely sees. And sometimes, those scars erupt into tragedy. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, please reach out. In the U.S., you can call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. Help is available, 24/7, in more than 170 languages. The murder of Alessandro Venier is not just a crime story. It's a chilling reminder that behind closed doors, in the quietest of towns, darkness can grow unchecked. A mother and a wife, bound together by fear, anger, and desperation, chose the most irreversible path. And now, their names will forever be linked to one of Italy's most shocking family crimes. This was the story of Lorena Venier. A mother who killed her son. A crime that stunned a nation.